500 million zloty. This is the amount of EU support that CPK has received until this day. This money will be spent on our investment in infrastructure. We'll talk about two of those today. We will summarize the work on two sections of the Y section, as in the letter Y, or in Polish, Y. The possibility to share and exchange information as we have it right now is the key to success during implementation of this sort of investments. This possibility is essential for any project co-financed by the EU. Today we are joined by experts, thanks to whom these investments can be implemented and EU support is received. I would like to welcome Minister Piotr Malepszak, President Marcin Michalski, our experts, Director Michał Jasiak and Director Michał Kazimierczak. We are still waiting for Minister Jan Szyszko and Director Ewa Cieślak-Wilk, who are on the way. Unfortunately, the weather is unfortunate, but we do hope that they will join us soon. So between the moment when the decision is made to implement a railway investment and the moment when we can start using infrastructure, it takes some 10 years, and over this period it is hundreds, if not thousands, of people in different institutions that have to work on such a project. Today we have a chance to learn from the experience of the people who have been working and will keep working on the success of this project. The implementation of any investment starts from the planning phase. It needs to be planned in a way that is coordinated with the remaining part of the transport system of any country. So as the first speaker is a person involved in planning of railway systems, I would like to invite Minister Piotr Malepszak to join me on stage. Good morning. I've noticed that the cars we've seen in this video were drifting so hard, so it's really impressive. I do pay attention to such details, so I'm really looking forward to this event. We are going to talk about big amounts of money. I enjoy talking about money because I've been working in this field for many years now, and I come from Poznań originally, which for some people will make it clear why I do pay attention to money, to public investment. It's really important to me personally that public funds are spent reasonably to the highest possible benefit of the final users of infrastructure, as well as companies such as different carriers in the transport sector. Agnieszka, you mentioned a period of 10 years in the implementation of investments. I would say it is at least 10 years when we talk about infrastructure. Those who have experience with high-speed transportation, the French, the Spanish, the Italians, but especially the French, they tend to say that it takes between 15 and 17 years on average between the first idea, the feasibility study, until the opening ceremony, when the first train can carry passengers. So it's a long time, and it takes billions of zlotys or euros. The process is very complicated, although for some it seems to be very simple. That's why over the last few months we've been reading on social media why we can't build the airport or the railway line in 2 or 3 years' time. Why do we want to spend so much time on building the Y section? Because the plan is to complete it by 2035. So I usually counter such statements with the question, do you know where we are in the investment process right now? Do you know what we have as regards documentation, what we don't have yet? And of course, then the people are confused because we haven't selected the general contractor yet. We are developing the design documentation, so it will take another important a few stages before we can start building. The Łódź tunnel is more advanced. However, this infrastructure for the Y or the Y project in Poznań will need some more time for sure. It is worth underlining to counter this populist argumentation, which I personally hate because it has nothing to do with the engineering or design process. It has nothing to do with the construction as such. It's just an element of what I call selling people illusions or selling dreams. I prefer to call it illusions, though, even though it may sound more drastic, because I do believe that we have many sellers of illusions that try to take over the media space and claim that without design documentation, you can complete an airport by 2027 or 28 in the pessimistic version. I try to be reasonable about spending public money, and I'm really level-headed about it. And I realize that we are talking about infrastructure as we haven't seen in Poland for the last 30 or 35 years. That's why, if we want to ensure that we build reliable infrastructure, it will take time. We realize that it is difficult for passengers, but sometimes we spend a lot of time on implementing investments, and it is still a burden on the people, and yet the effects are miserable. We want to avoid it because in this project we want to reach impressive results by shortening the travel time between Warsaw, Wrocław and Poznań. We want to make sure that the new airport is reached by train. We want to release capacities of existing railway lines to make additional traffic, both passenger and cargo traffic, possible. So, looking at the entirety of this process, I started by looking and talking about money, and I will finish by talking about money. The Y project will cost 70 billion zloty. This number may change and probably will over time, because already at design stage we see that certain alterations have to be done. 4 platforms versus 6 platforms is one such example. There will be other changes as well. The most important thing, though, is that we create infrastructure that's well adjusted to the needs of the people of the future passenger streams. We have the tools that will help us create reliable estimations so that we don't overdo it in terms of capacities, but also so that we can avoid insufficient capacities in the future. This is what we've been working very hard on. I've been personally involved in this process with Maciej Lasek and the CPK Management Board. And our goal is that in 2 years' time, we are able to start building the first components, maybe the second high-speed tunnel in Łódź. And the year 2035 is not about selling you any illusions, fairy tales or dreams. It's a realistic action plan that we have adopted as of today. So that's all from me. I'm sure there will be questions afterwards. I will stay to answer them, because I believe we need to counter statements of storytellers or dreamers or sellers of illusions that tend not to know much about the realities of the project. Sometimes there are people who've never ever built anything, never even visited a construction site. And yet this is something we have to confront every now and then. It's important to do it in the media, the social media as well. We are serious about spending public money. We want this investment to be implemented by serious players, those working in CPK and their partners, who have a realistic approach to what we want to achieve. Thank you. Thank you. So the minister has been talking about money, about a lot of money, and already at a very early stage, this money can start driving the Polish economy. I'm talking about national funds, but also EU funds, which provide a very strong stimulus to the development of our economy. So the people, among the people who make sure that we have access to such support is Mr. Minister Jan Szyszko, who will now join us on stage. Good morning. I want to make a correction because I don't think it's right to say that it is thanks to me in any way that we receive EU subsidies. I'm just one of many in this, well, sort of relay race of people who have been successfully, that is true, have been successfully working together for many years to obtain EU funds. I'm talking about people working in the ministries competent for EU funds. And it is true that we are dealing with an unprecedented scale of support, financial support, but sometimes it seems that we have EU funds, so it's very natural that we will have investments, that it would be beneficial for Poland, that it will be done in transportation, in local governments, in the environment, etc. Well, it is not so obvious. If we compare Poland to other states of the region, we can see that these investments progress in Poland and to much better than in other countries and to a much higher benefit to our population. The Polish better model is simply very good, and it is due to the people who have developed this model and who have consistently been implementing it in practice. It is still rare that we can say that there is something we are best at in Europe. This is one such example. So I believe it is worth emphasizing. I've been asked to talk to you about the benefits of our EU membership, and I feel that I am sort of guest speaker here. I'm not directly connected to the CPK, and there are much better experts than myself sitting in this room. So I will try to focus on what I'm responsible for at my work, what I work with. These are EU funds. And I would like to talk about how we see the new EU financial framework. Of course, looking at the advantages or the benefits, the dimension of national or country development is essential, also being part of the second biggest economy globally. We tend to forget about that. But thanks to our EU membership, Poland does have an influence on the further development of EU economy. It also gives us safety and security because we can strengthen and further develop our infrastructure. CPK is co-financed, or the projects implemented by the CPK are co-financed by the European Union. This priority will not change. But as Minister Maleszak has said, I know he said it in other words, but I understood your words as you saying that you don't like beating around the bush. So starting from the new financial perspective, 2027, it's very clear that Poland will have less money from the cohesion fund, because as a country we've become richer, and the cohesion fund is supposed to provide equal opportunities. So now, as we are richer, we will naturally receive less money than before. Of course, we will negotiate on the new financial perspective. These negotiations will formally begin after June or July next year, but informal conversations and negotiations will begin during our presidency. And I'm sure that in these negotiations, we will try and warn our partners in Europe and within the European Commission that they should not become perhaps overexcited about the national reconstruction and recovery funds. Of course, it does have certain benefits and advantages, but also there are also clear disadvantages.
And the disadvantages are quite clear if you compare recovery countries in Poland and in other countries. And you will be able to see then that the reforms differ, and the difficulties arising from them differ. And it's related to bilateral negotiations of those plans, the EU Commission and a member state. And in the cohesion policy, the approach is much broader, which gives you more balance. We don't want to centralize fund spending because of effectiveness measures as well as because of political reasons. Cohesion policy is to a large extent managed by member states and regions, as is the case in Poland. And it's a big benefit of this policy because it allows you to better diagnose investment goals, and it allows you to develop support for the European Union. This means that everybody feels like they co-decide about where the EU funds are spent, that it's not just a decision of someone in Brussels, but it's taken locally. In my opinion, it's a very strong foundation for the support of the EU, which needs reinforcement. There are some central funds of the EU that do work well, and we want to tap on them. One of them is Connecting Europe facility, and it's also one that can be used in our projects. And we use it as Poland. We are the largest beneficiary after 10 years. So CEF transport, which connects Europe in the transport area, it can be used to implement more ambitious, bigger projects such as CPK, such as Y or Ypsilon. A path that allows you to effectively implement a dual-use infrastructure. It's both in the interest of Poland and in the interest of the majority of member states. So it's an area around which we can develop common understanding. I don't want to use the word alliance. It would be too much to say that, but common understanding on the future budget, understanding that exceeds the East-West alliance in the EU, because the supporters of Connecting Europe facility, which will finance hopefully a CPK even more in the future, are geographically distributed across Europe. So we are avoiding here those traditional divisions in the negotiations in this way. So that's by way of introduction. So I feel like a guest here, so apologies if I disappointed you in my role as non-expert in the area of CPK. I'm happy to talk more about EU funds. If you have questions, I assure you that we will do our best to make sure that funds for infrastructure, for transport and railway infrastructure will be our priority, also during budget negotiations. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. For sure, you're an expert in EU funds. So thank you so much for your introduction. EU funds that come to Poland, they are used by beneficiaries. And the beneficiaries are responsible for settlements, for applications. When it comes to railway investments, they are key to the system of railways in Poland, to Ypsilon. Yes, it's supposed to be key as an east-west axis and as an accelerator of numerous connections, not just direct connections between the biggest cities. So this key investment is realized by CPK. We are responsible for obtaining and using these funds, and we have top experts to do that. Let me now invite member of the management board, Marcin Michalski. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, ministers. Glad to have you both in spite of the traffic problems in Warsaw. Welcome to the representatives of the Ministry of Infrastructure, Ministry of Funds and Regional Policy, and the Center of EU Transport Projects, as well as representatives of CPK. It is thanks to you that we are meeting here today. We are meeting to sum up the implementation of two projects co-financed from CEF, Connecting Europe facility. Talking about Ypsilon project, we've already heard about it on several occasions, as well as tunnel in Łódź. These are one of the first projects implemented by CPK with the EU financing. The EU funds. This is a subsidy of around 100 million zloty for the two projects allocated in 2021. The projects involved the development, the documentation for the project, so design documentation, as well as obtaining environmental decisions for Ypsilon and a construction permit for high-speed railway tunnel in Łódź. This was the first, a very important step in the investment process. We all realize that from the moment of working out design documentation through to the required administrative decisions, it all takes time, and this is the start of the investment. Project implementation allows us to take the next steps to arrive at other strategic goals of CPK company. One of the goals is to construct high-speed railway in Poland. Construction of high-speed railway in Poland will allow to shorten the travel time between the largest cities in Poland. It's a very important investment that will have impact on the functioning of the Polish railways. It's an important step in the implementation of our project, 100 Minutes Poland. So this is how we develop a transport network in the country. We develop a new infrastructure to make sure that trains can travel faster and so that we can arrive at locations faster in better conditions than before. Today, we have quite advanced working progress in Łódź, and when it comes to the tunnel under the House of Culture and Redkinia tunnel. We already announced the tender for construction works related to the construction of a tunnel in Łódź. It's going to be excavated using TBM method, a 14-meter diameter, 4.10 kilometers, 4.6 kilometers will be the length, and this is the most advanced project. After the completion in 2032, after the Warsaw-Łódź section is completed, the travel time will be 40 minutes. We are truly happy that the European Commission and the European Union supports Poland in the development of this tunnel. So far, we obtained around 500 million zloty from Connecting Europe Fund, and railway is our biggest component in our investments. And this is also the most environmentally friendly mode of transport, which falls under the environmental policy of the European Union. So it's not just about including the CPK network in TEN-T. It's also about its funding by the European Union. We'll soon sign another contract with Cineo for Sieradz-Poznań section for design work. The development of a railway network will first start with Warsaw-Łódź section, and then will continue through Wrocław and Poznań. And we've already mentioned Ypsilon project. We've been waiting for such projects for many years. Ypsilon project, and the minister talked about it, will offer faster connection between the cities that I mentioned, and it will improve connectivity to other cities, arrival at those cities, and transport through and traffic through the new railway network. When it comes to the remaining railway lines, we are now starting our work which is aimed at determining their priority. And we will take into account the location across European pathways or networks. We will be using tools that will help us to find the best decision based on data that we keep obtaining. So we wouldn't have arrived at those successes if it wasn't for our good cooperation with the ministries, with the authorities, ZUPT, and with your support for the project. So thank you so much to those of you responsible at CPK, those of you responsible for investment processes. But in particular, let me thank the employees engaged in the process of obtaining EU funds and settling EU funds, because it's their hard work that allowed us to talk about these things today. Thank you so much. Well, we know and do realize that obtaining EU funds, signing contracts, it's not just our success as CPK company. There is an institution that has been taking care of it at every stage. They have been supporting us in the development of problems. They help us submit applications just to make sure that Poland and us take advantage of those funds as effectively as possible. This institution is close to beneficiaries, and it's present at every stage of obtaining EU funds. And now, let me invite to the stage Madam Director Sylwia Cieślak-Wilk from the Center for EU Transport Projects.
Dzień dobry Państwu.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear ministers, dear President. Thank you very much for the friendly words from the host, and thank you everyone on behalf of the Center for EU Transportation Projects for the invitation to this conference. The President has already talked a lot about EU funds, about the projects themselves, so if you will allow me, instead of repeating the information, I would like to talk to you about the manner of implementing and spending the EU money under the CEF. So CEF is different from the Cohesion Fund because it is directly managed by the European Commission. What does it mean in practice? It means that it is the Commission that carried out, that announces the call for proposals and then selects the projects that will receive the funding. The European Commission distributes money from the Cohesion Funds through three streams: general, cohesion, and money spent for dual-use infrastructure. In the 2021-2027 perspective, the amount of money to be spent under CEF is more than 33 billion euro. And it's important to emphasize that in the general amount or general stream, the amount available to all member states is 12.8 billion for transportation. In the cohesion part, for those countries who use cohesion policy and meet the conditions, the amount of money to spend is 11.2 billion. And for transport, regarding infrastructure and available funding for civil and military infrastructure, the amount available is 1.6 billion euro. At the level of the European Commission, it is TINE a special agency that's responsible for implementing the funds. It is TINA that signs the grant agreements with beneficiaries. And then on national levels, in the field of transportation, the body responsible for implementation and management are two ministries. The body that manages and organizes the competitions, etc., is the Ministry for European Funds and Development Policy. Minister of EU funds is responsible for creating the system for funding and then settling all the projects. As for the selection of priorities for transportation, this is the field for the Ministry of Transport. It is the Ministry of Transport that also negotiates the amounts to be spent on the individual fields, negotiates with the European Commission about the organizational perspective. Then on national level, we sign grant agreements or cooperation, mutual cooperation agreements, which means that every quarter selected beneficiaries that are covered by the public finance regime receive money transfers for implementation of the projects. We also visit them in order to monitor the projects. We advise them. We carried out ex-ante analysis of tender documentation, especially when it's covered by public procurement. We carry out financial audits. We audit applications for payment. These applications are submitted by railway companies and PJP beneficiaries. They submit them to CINEA in order, for example, to receive a prepayment, an advance payment. In the last perspective, it was 68 projects that we covered. The total value of EU subsidy was 20 billion zloty. In this perspective, it is already 31 grant agreements that have been signed. They amount to more than 11 billion zloty. What's also important to know, CPK, as the President has rightly said, has signed 4 grant agreements that are being settled right now. We will be signing one more, and then we will continue implementing a project that was already financed in the last perspective. From the point of view of implementing the CEF, 2 projects that are discussed at this conference are already at final stages of implementation. Regarding the tunnel in Łódź, the financial progress has reached 82%. As regards the feasibility study and the related work for the Warsaw-Poznań section, the financial progress is almost 80% of the total project value. As a member state, we have to settle both projects next year. The final applications for payment will be submitted in the mid-next year, probably. So it will mean that by then the project will have been closed. So what else remains to be said? I believe thank you. Thank you, ministers. Thank you, President, for effective and efficient cooperation, for professional approach of all your employees. We congratulate you on your hard work and on your persistence. We wish you a lot of success in obtaining further CEF funds, and obviously we will continue to stay in touch during the remaining part of the implementation. Thank you. Yes, and now we will talk specifics. specifics of both projects, but we will focus on the Ypsilon mostly. So infrastructure costs billions of money to be built. So it's really important to plan at the right scale so that there are no capacity-related problems in the future. It has to be well adjusted to the timetable, but not the current timetable, the future timetable that passengers will need. So it takes over a dozen years for the whole process, from planning to the inauguration, to cutting the ribbon, so to say. So how do we know if the infrastructure we have planned and we want to build will be really efficient and will meet the needs? This is the subject of the next presentation that will be held by Michał Jasiak, Deputy Minister for Analysis. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I was surprised to hear and watch this longer intro part before my speech. Probably this presentation will be slightly longer, or has been planned slightly longer than the previous speeches. Maybe that's the reason for the longer intro. I will focus on the study phase in my presentation, bearing in mind that 80% of funds or financial progress has been reached already. In substantive terms, the progress has been even bigger than that. So naturally, this speech will, in a way, close a bracket, so to say, or and maybe round up the study phase. For me, it's also a summary of 5 years of work in the CPK on different studies. I had the privilege of working on the first assumptions and further development along, of course, with many people, thanks to whom we are very advanced in design work. I'm sure most of you, when you hear about the Ypsilon project, thinks about Centralny Port Komunikacyjny, or CPK. However, the reality is that the Ypsilon project is much more than that, and it started much earlier than the work on the CPK. So the first formal mention about the Ypsilon can be found as early as 28 years ago, 1996, in a program for high-speed railway lines in Poland, with the intended implementation execution date in 2030. So we are still quite close to reaching that goal that was set out actually very early in the history of free Poland. Because from the very beginning, it was an important part of our vision. And of course, then it was followed by the feasibility study, 2009, 2013. More detailed feasibility studies were implemented. Then the decision was made that due to certain delays in the investment project, the work has to be focused on modernizing the existing railway lines. But in 2013, the Ypsilon was proposed as a part of the 10T core network, with planned completion in 2030. So it shows a certain continuity in the thinking about the Ypsilon, about the way it will connect Polish cities and be a part of a wider transport network. At the year 2017, when the first concept for CPK was adopted, in 2019, when the CPK company started working, was like later. So you can see that the history of the Ypsilon is much longer and is reflected in the number of strategic documents such as the transportation policy of Poland, strategy for railway transportation, master plan for railway transportation, or the current sustainable development strategy for transport strategy. So this idea is reflected in all these documents. Also, the progress of work is quite advanced because it continued over the years. In 2019, we started out as a CPK in a group of less than 20 people. We only just starting. So we adopted the CPK concept and the main decisions were made, and we are wondering how all that should be implemented, how to organize institutional capacities, how to prepare the investment process that will bring us to the point where we are right now. So naturally we had to focus on building a team first and then on some strategic work and decisions, and then it had to be followed by a study phase. Between 2020 and 2021, a study of the location of the site was prepared. We don't remember that document that well anymore, but back then it was one of the biggest consultation projects nationwide. It covered all railway lines that were planned. 140,000 people participated in the consultation. Based on that, we prepared the strategic environmental assessment, which is inevitable for projects of this scale. There was also a number of other issues regarding different aspects of the project, including the awareness of local communities that will be affected. And back then we talked about the so-called corridors. We didn't have the exact routes of the lines. We analyzed the planned corridors. And back then, as part of the strategic study of the site, we received a confirmation of the current routes, so the routes of Warsaw to Łódź, the switch in Sieradz, and leading further to Poznań. It's now slightly different than first planned, because first it was supposed to be in Nowe Skalmierzyce by Ostrów Wielkopolski.
So, and this is how we were able to bring stability to the corridor. And the next stage that was implemented later was focus on detail of several investment options that we implemented under feasibility study. The feasibility study was launched on the 7th of June 2021. With a signing of the agreement with the contractor back then. Part of the work was done by us. We did a pre-selection, and the contractor, as a starting point, received four lines under the corridor. And the 4 lines were discussed in detail in terms of analytics, technical aspects. All environmental conditions were taken into account. Consultations were carried out in the communities. In the communes, we visited every commune twice. We talked about the preferences of the local authorities and about the limitations concerning the preferences. And we often found out about them while we were in the field. And thanks to that, we were able to take into account a whole range of aspects in the multi-criteria analysis, and this allowed us to choose the best option for the whole line that we are working on under the project. So this option was not satisfactory to everyone. It's impossible to satisfy all parties. And there were a lot of cases where municipalities were proposing solutions which were mutually exclusive, but I guess we were able to find a compromise. And as a rule, hasn't been challenged today. And it's worth mentioning that the process of working out the feasibility study took only a year. On the 7th of June 2022, a year later, we were able to announce the investor's option or variant. It was a very intensive period, but we were well prepared for it. We managed to develop the dedicated terms of reference and take a whole range of organizational measures and that helped us implement projects. We developed the company based on project structure, focusing on projects as a priority. And this is how we work. Our priority is to implement projects by the specific deadlines. We developed a solution that we keep continuing today, namely integrated teams. This was a new solution in our relationship with the contractor because we wanted to have the highest quality of documentation. But on the other hand, we wanted to ensure smooth development of the documentation. So we decided that the cooperation should be much more close and not just at the stage of ordering works and then commissioning them and then approving them, but it was supposed to be a continuous cooperation between working groups that were established in all areas: environment, technical aspects, and analytical aspects, where experts from CPK talked directly to experts from the contractor. And thus, the product was established under our strict control. We were able to comment on it as we were collecting more evidence, more data. And as a result, we were able to develop this product, a feasibility study, over such a short period of time, and at the same time ensure high quality of documentation, thanks to which the project phase, the design phase, can be now further developed. And now, in 2024, when it comes to Warsaw-Łódź project, in January this year, the situation was as follows. So for this section, we obtain a whole set of environmental decisions, while for the project from Łódź to Wrocław and Sieradz to Poznań, the work is still in the pipeline. 6 months later, so it's a bit longer, and the design phase was also longer. We are now at the stage of designing and obtaining environmental decisions. In the course of our work, we developed strong competences. I mentioned integrated teams and strict cooperation with contractors. It's important to say that it wouldn't have been possible if we at CPK didn't have strong expert knowledge in all areas. So technical aspects, and my colleague Director Kazimierzak will say more about it. We had designers in all areas. We have strong competences in terms of analytics and environment, as well as cooperation with stakeholders. And a good example is today's conference. Thanks to that, the process can be implemented with the involvement of top experts in the country that are employed in the company and are partly present in this room. We are talking about Ypsilon project as Warsaw, Łódź, Wrocław-Poznań connection, the first, third, and fourth largest city in Poland. But it's worth taking a broader look. It's also about the European context. It's not just about connecting big cities in the country, but also about connecting Ypsilon with the Baltic countries and with Rail Baltica project. So it is thanks to connecting Warsaw with Białystok, and the travel time will be already shorter. The trains will be able to travel faster than before. Then further work towards Suwałki, towards Polish-Lithuanian border are in the pipeline, and we will connect with Rail Baltica, creating a transport axis from Western Europe and Southern Europe through Poland to the Baltic states. It's very important. Considering the geopolitical circumstances. It's not just the Baltic states, also connections to the west from Poznań. So Berlin will be much closer now. Also connection towards the south. Warsaw, Łódź, Wrocław, which then will go through Hradec Kralowe to Prague, creating a high-speed railway axis connecting Poland and the Czech Republic. And then connection towards Berlin and Prague. These are further activities that require further investment. But Ypsilon is supposed to not only connect those three cities, but actually to collect a whole plethora of other cities like Szczecin, Kraków, Białystok, and Wrocław, and other foreign cities. So we will see the benefits in the future as we implement other investments. So in practice, it's the implementation of EU transport goals related to the development of high-speed railways in all countries. Thus, the EU financing is a very important factor because on the one hand, it falls under the EU goals, but on the other hand, on the design stage, study stage, it offers us financial stability as well as ensures meeting specific deadlines and milestones. So revision of 10T set specific goals, which we are following perfectly. So I mentioned the feasibility study, but it's worth mentioning that this project is going to have an impact on the whole transport system in Poland. So we couldn't only focus on sections. We had to take a broader look. We wanted to implement certain new standards. We wanted to plan a certain change with regard to railway transport. And here, let me quote the following measures: implementation of building information modeling in Poland, BIM, as a central, as a CPK. We are a company which follows BIM in its infrastructural design. So the whole design documentation is not printed. It's only available and managed electronically in cooperation with our contractor. We are working with a single file with the contractor, and it's a solution that was initiated in UK. We implemented it and developed it creatively, and we hope that also in other investments realized by other investors, we will be able to serve our good experience. We worked out technical standards for the development of high-speed railway, contrary to the Czech railways, which they bought the French standards, but we developed our standards from scratch using the experience of the Railway Institute and the experience of our expert colleagues. We developed a passenger transport model that allows us to evaluate the impact of these investments on the amount of passengers and flow of passengers. We adapted to our needs, and we focus on the flows of passengers between the cities, and depending on the timetable. We know that we need to focus on the impact of Ypsilon project. We wanted to develop a tool for the needs of railways in order to be able to forecast with a lot of detail. We have cost and benefit analysis, which evaluates the economic effect of the implementation of individual works. And also, contrary to a lot of investments, we are able to assess the effect of investment across the whole network. Also, nodes. There was some criticism that the project applies only to big cities, but that's not true, because such localities as Sieradz or Kalisz will have a connection with Ypsilon. We are planning, in cooperation with local mayors and with local authorities, we are planning those nodes, and we know that it can be an impulse for the development of these cities, because the train connections will be more frequent, and the connections will be much better. These are the experiences that we've seen in Western European countries, where smaller cities or towns, thanks to new transport possibilities, they were able to develop really well. And this is what we want to accomplish in this project as well. That's not all with planning and with studying. I said that we are completing a certain phase, but the study phase is still ongoing to a much more limited extent, because development of a railway line, it's not all. After the railway line, so the railway line has to be used by trains, and the trains are a product for the passengers that passengers will use. So we want to develop the infrastructure in the best possible scope, so that it fits the needs. But we need to know the transport needs. We need to plan the traffic of trains. And these are the things that we are implementing in our project horizontal timetable. So first, we are analyzing the future transport offer, and this project will be the basis to implement liberalization of long-distance travel in Poland, because of the scale of impact of Ypsilon and its impact on the whole railway network. Also, thanks to decisions that have been taken, and as we continue our study work, we are changing the assumptions related to maximum speed. So the geometry of railway line was developed for 350 kilometers per hour. So that's why we are able to increase the speed for the fastest trains from 250 kilometers per hour, as was planned before. Now we plan that the fastest, not all, but the fastest trains will travel with the speed of 320 kilometers per hour. So that's the element of the study phase, where we are adapting the project as far as possible to the needs. And we are able to do that in a planned way based on figures and data. Now, looking at history that I quoted at the very beginning of my speech, we are the most advanced. So after 28 years, where we were focusing on copying of this project in individual transport strategies, feasibility study was carried out, and only some of the work was used and copied and pasted. Now we are much further.
So by now we have the environmental permit for Warsaw-Łódź section. We are very advanced in terms of design work for the whole section. We are slowly preparing for the execution phase, and the execution phase will end in 2032, when the first trains will travel between Warsaw and Łódź. It seems long, but it includes not only the execution of construction work, but also the entire process of commissioning, certification, implementation of a new system. It takes more than 1 day or 1 month. There is a number of things that have to be tested, certified, in order to realistically implement a new transport system. 2035 is the deadline by which the whole Ypsilon project should become operational on all its section from Warsaw to Poznań and Wrocław. At the end, I would like to add my voice to the thanks expressed by Mr. Michalski. I'm also very grateful to many people from the CPK present here in this room, but not only have supported us. I'm also very grateful to the contractors who have worked very hard on creating the documentation. I would like to thank the Center for EU transportation projects. I would like to thank the ministries. Sometimes it is thanks to your critical opinion about our proposals. We were encouraged to look deeper into the project and improve the quality of our documentation. I would also like to thank our EU partners. Of course, our relations are more general and remote, but we value your contribution to the implementation of these projects, which are so important, not only to Poland individually, but the entire European transportation system. After these 5 years of study work, I can say that it's been a huge challenge sometimes, but it has brought us a lot of satisfaction when we could watch how the project is developing. We're also very happy with cooperation with all the teams, and we do hope that the upcoming design and then implementation stages will be equally satisfactory, leading to the final first journey along this line in 2023. When we will celebrate the great success of this project. Thank you. Thank you very much. I have to say goodbye. I'm sorry, because of the weather in Warsaw, I have to leave early to reach another meeting that I'm obliged to be at. So I want to say thank you and apologize, but I do have to say goodbye. 28 years have passed from the first mention of the project. I'm not sure if you noticed in the first video, there were some pictures from the construction site. It was the construction site of the Y project. It is the Łódź city center. You can see how the project is progressing, this high-speed project. The Y project is the most advanced of the project we have right now. This is also a project where we try some things for the first time. We use certain new technologies for the first time. We use new methods. We gain experience, and we are doing very well in that. Mr. Michał Kazimierczak, the CPK, will explain how. I took a longer path than Michał did, and yet the intro was longer than I thought. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great honor to tell you about how we spent the money in the CPK. I would like to talk about the long-distance tunnel in Łódź specifically. So, from the point of view of construction, the tunnel consists of several separate elements from the east. So the TBM disassembly shaft is one of them. Then the tunnel itself that will be drilled. Then the launch shaft and the connection to the 14 railway line. So this is the Redkinia junction. So the beginning of our tunnel constitutes its end at the same time, because we will be drilling it starting from Redkinia as well. This has something to do with technical possibilities and the possibilities to organize the construction site. In fact, the history of the Łódź tunnel starts as early as December 2020. It was the moment when the tender for design work was announced. In the first quarter of 2021, we opened the bids submitted in the tender, and in quarter 4 of 2021, we signed an agreement with the general contractor, a consortium, under the leadership of Metro Project Company. The scope of work covered many elements, obtaining the environmental permitting for the Redkynia junction, the spatial and programmatic concept, the construction design as well, and a number of other permits that are required in such a project. During the design work, some technical aspects became more clear. For example, the TBM diameter, it is 14 meters. By the way, it will be the tunnel with the biggest diameter to be drilled in Poland. Internal diameter is 12.5 meters, so this is the space that will be available to the two-track railway line. The design speed in the tunnel will 160 kilometers per hour. There will be a lot of technical aspects here. It's close to my heart. The method we use for the track is the so-called ballast-free technology. The tunnel itself, it's not just the tube that we drill using the TBM, it's much more than that. For example, staircases or technical shafts, there will be 5 of those along the tunnel. These will be escape routes, or spaces for different installations, ventilation, but also electricity, etc. The railway lines will be electrified, of course, will be use standard voltage 3 kV. This is typical for Poland. Of course, it should become a part of the whole system, so naturally use the same standards from the Łódź Fabryczna station. Will be connected to the 14 railway line through the Redkynia junction. It will be connected with the rest of the system. We've seen many times on screen already the information that the deepest spot in the tunnel will be 33 meters below ground. Normally it's less than that, between 22 and 25 meters. The final section also hosts the junction, which connects the tunnel to the railway line number 14. It's also very important for us that we design with a certain way, because we need to meet certain evacuation escape criteria so that we meet all the interoperability criteria that are required in Europe. And this has already brought me actually to the phase of execution. 2 construction sites are working in which already we are working on reinforcing the foundations of the Łódź Cultural Center, because in certain parts the TBM will cross under the building. That's why the foundation had to be reinforced. On the other side, from the Redkynia station, we are working on the launch chamber or launch shaft for the TBM. So we build it in an open cast method. We are building diaphragm walls at the moment and preparing to start building the retrieval, so the target shaft near Łódź Fabryczna. And of course, we are about to begin the drilling itself, so the main part of the construction work. That's all from me. Thank you. Thank you very much. I know that we have addressed many different topics. We've had a lot of different information. So you might have questions. If you have questions, you can ask them now. Of course, if you'd prefer to ask them directly after the conference, you can do it as well. But if you have any questions at this stage, please raise your hand. If you don't have any at the moment, I have a few. So, Madam Director, We've talked a lot about using EU funds, about different procedures, and your institution is there to support beneficiaries at all stages. But what's the biggest challenge in obtaining EU funds? Minister Szyszko said that obtaining EU funds is something we are the best at. But what are some challenges that still exist? Well, in fact, we do have quite a lot of experience in obtaining EU funds. We have specialist staff in railway companies, in the General Directorate for Motorways and National Roads. That's why we have a relatively high level of approval of our applications. This is true. In the transportation sector, Poland has a very clear idea about the target network, so to say, that we are slowly developing. We are right now updating the plans for the railway connections so that we can prepare good, solid feasibility studies. The Commission is aware of it. The Commission is also aware of the large-scale consultation projects that we carry out. They take a lot of time, and yet Poland has really been doing it very well. In many cases, the Commission admitted that Poland's work in this regard has been exemplary. Also, some very good relationships and negotiations that are sometimes carried out unofficially. This is something we do very well. The ministries talk to the Commission, talk to SINEA. SINEA and the Commission can really see how Poland has changed, how it's changing thanks to EU funds. They see our roads, they see our modernized railway lines. All these things are visible from Brussels. And for EU officials, these effects are a guarantee that the funds assigned to Poland will not go to waste. Of course, all the funds spent are verified and reported back to the Commission. But believe it or not, but at our center we look at every single invoice to make sure that it is compliant, that it complies with the Polish procurement law, but also with the environmental legislation of the EU and a number of other regulations. So when the European Commission receives documentation from Poland, it has already been proved. So now they can rely on the reliability of these documents. Together with the Ministry of EU Funds, we make sure that already now we prepare a wide portfolio of projects that will be applied for in the next editions of the competitions. It is essential that at the stage of a competition or call for proposals, the applications are very well prepared so that the progress in terms of environmental permits, for example, is very high. Thank you. Are there any other questions? When you have questions, please make sure to use the microphone. Robert Przybylski, Rzeczpospolita. So will there be enough money for completing the CPK project if, as you said, the available funds will be reduced? Minister Szyszko mentioned that in the future financial perspective there will be less funds available than before. So as regards funds from the cohesion fund, so funds that do not have to be repaid, probably or possibly will be less. However, the CEF, the instrument managed directly by the European Commission, will be maintained, we believe, either in an unchanged form or in a slightly altered one. Transportation project will have will have priority before other projects implemented under the European Commission? Exactly. Minister, could you focus on the Ypsilon project itself, which is essential? What is its significance for our entire transportation network? Well, looking at the figures. So we estimate, looking at different places in the setting for the CPK, 300 trains will stop there every day. So now if we look at the average number of passengers per train, 250 to 270 per train, multiply it by 300 and it gives you a number of passengers reaching more or around 60 and 80 passengers per day. These are figures reported by this CPK. So this is just, if you just multiply 270 by 300, it gives you 81,000 passengers. So these are the volumes we are talking about, of course. The highest number of passengers we reach right now is 55,000 passengers per day between Warsaw and Poznań in peak season. And so this line will become the #1 in terms of passenger traffic, not only between the Warszawa-Zachodnia station and the airport, but also further to Poznań, to Wrocław. We will be talking about 27,000 passengers per day. So it will be twice as much, or actually more than twice as much as what we can achieve nowadays between Warsaw and Poznań. So it will become a strong accelerator of passenger traffic, not only between those bigger cities, but also along the east-west axis and north-south axis if we enter the CMC station from north to south. So the passenger traffic will be essential for CPK. But that's not the only aspect. I believe it will be useful for light cargo traffic as well, especially when you think about intermodal transport. This model is developing all the time. We still have a lot of room for further growth of volumes of goods transported by rail. So a few years back, there were these ideas to use the Ypsilon project for light and fast-moving cargo traffic in order to reduce the burden on the existing lines. I think it will be significant as well. In general, the capacity of the Polish railway lines will be improved once this project is completed, not only between Warsaw, Łódź, Poznań and Wrocław, but also many other places.
So the numbers tell us that Ypsilon is a strong project, both in terms of volume, and the volume then translates into the number of trains counted in hundreds. It needs to be highlighted, so hundreds of trains. So you will see that the use of infrastructure will be intense. Thank you. Any other questions? Well, in that case, I have two questions. The first to Michał Jasiak from the Analysis Center. We talked about the length of the investment process. What does it comprise, this process, that we are talking about years here? Well, I was able to explain certain things in my speech. I only focused on the strategic and study phase. But then we develop documents, the designs, and key administrative decisions have to be taken, like construction permit, location decision, and so on. And then approval of the infrastructure for use. These are the key elements that are still ahead of us, and we are getting ready for it. We will try to implement it quite efficiently. But looking at the number of elements and on how they overlap, it all boils down to more than a dozen years for projects implemented in Western Europe. In the case of smaller projects, the deadlines were shorter. But let me compare this to an investment process in construction of highways. So when you travel by car, you can ask a question, how come it was possible to build these roads and highways so fast? And how come in the case of railway, it's different and longer? Often this comparison is made, but the reality is that railways are a much more complex system. So once a road project has a ready surface, you can think about temporary approval for use. For example, in the case of Euro football championships in 2012, in the case of railways, first it needs to be tested and tried just to make sure that the rail traffic is safe. And there are many more elements. So, for example, in the case of trains, we have control systems, we have rails and bedding. So these are extra elements compared to roads, and thus the process takes longer. Often the preparations for the investments are much more complex. Thus, the deadlines we are talking about. And the last question on my part. Director Kazimierczak mentioned a method that is used for excavating the tunnel. It's not that common. You mentioned TBM. How come you chose this method, and what is it all about? Well, thank you. Good technical question. It's good for me. So, when it comes to the method, TBM method, it's the use of tunnel boring machine. And it's a machine that excavates the tunnel. It enters the ground and thus creates a tunnel. And its cross-section is circular. So we decided to opt for this method because of the conditionalities. Our tunnel starts in the center of Łódź, in downtown. It's quite an urbanized, developed land, and TBM minimizes impact on the surface. So you can excavate the tunnel, minimizing impact of the construction work on what's happening on the top, on the surface. And on top of that, it's a relatively fast method compared to other methods. If we were to opt for mining methods that do not require opening the whole surface, in which it would be impossible, it's a much more faster method. And TBM is much more faster, and it minimizes technological risks that the mining method has. I meant that open mining method, so excavating the tunnel from the top. But in Łódź, we wouldn't be able to do that. So the only logical and natural choice for us was to use TBM, tunnel boring machine. Thank you so much. So to sum up, ladies and gentlemen, we are implementing an investment which is one of a kind, the first in many terms supported from EU funds. And from the very beginning through to now and in the future, hundreds of people were involved in it. Dozens of investments. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to the ministry. Thank you to the center and our experts involved. Thank you so much to our speakers for the time, for sharing your knowledge and experiences. And we can now continue our talks informally. Thank you. And you're all invited for coffee.